Iowa State beat Texas yesterday, not in the first half, because no one beats Texas in the first half, but in the game, because everyone beats Texas in the second half. Yet another halftime lead, yet another blown halftime lead in the second half. Texas, it's been the worst case to the best case to the worst case again when it comes to the whole quarterback dynamic. All the way back in preseason, we were talking about the whole Hudson Card, Casey Thompson thing. Every single late kick, it seemed like we were having a new quarterback update, and it ended up being Hudson Card. But then they go to Arkansas, and they get down, and Casey Thompson comes in. And then Casey Thompson, he's starting Red River, and he shines, and they lose, but he puts up big numbers, and it looks like Casey Thompson has taken that job by the throat, but it's a long season. And people get a little bit of film on you, and they get a little bit of a chance to diagnose you and what they would do against you. And man, it gets to be a long month of November. October and then November, like we said, it can seem like about 13 weeks sometimes. And so that's what led to, again, kind of the merry-go-round at the quarterback position. And you're not doing that this late in the year and having a lot of success. If you are, you're very much the exception to the rule. So yesterday they played both guys, and neither of them did anything particularly of note. And now Texas, I believe they are 4-5, and they've got Kansas at West Virginia and Kansas State coming up. And if I'm right, off the top of my head, them being 4-5, they're going to need 2 of those in order to make a bowl. And that's a team that had illusions of maybe fringe playoff contender status early in the season, Big 12 championship. Well, that's all out the window. They got a very, very poor streak going right now that they've got to rectify. A lot of criticism about Sark. No, not even starting to go there. I certainly think there's an assessment that's done at the end of every season by the head coach, and so he'll do the same thing this year. I'm much more paid attention to their recruiting right now, honestly, than I am their win and loss record. Iowa State, though, 3 losses right now. 2 of them are in conference. They still have a shot. They are a 2-loss team in the Big 12. Still got a shot. Their, as I can tell, best case would be Oklahoma winning every game except when they play them. Because Oklahoma still plays Baylor. We're going to be at that game Saturday in Waco. So Oklahoma at Baylor. Iowa State needs the Sooners to win that game. You know, Iowa State need the Sooners to beat Oklahoma State down the road. They just need them to drop one in Norman to them while they're at it. Tennessee 45. Kentucky 42. This sounded like a classic to me. I was listening to it on the radio, driving my prison inmate van back from College Station to Austin last night, and what a great story that's going to be on the Tuesday morning podcast. One of the biggest recruiting billboards in college football right now is just what Hendon Hooker is doing under Josh Heupel at Tennessee. Phenomenal job of development, of coaching, of maximizing and utilizing the pieces you have. And to be clear, Josh Heupel and his staff, first year there, and they came in under far less than ideal circumstances, as you remember, and yet Hendon Hooker, yesterday, 15 of 20, 316 yards, 4 touchdowns, but they are getting the job done. And again, there are other teams out there with far more talented overall rosters that wish they could get the kind of production level that Josh Heupel has gotten in year 0/year 1, however you want to phrase it, at Tennessee. Many good things can be said. Many poor things can be said about SEC officiating. That's a course that we're seeing in every week now. It totally boggles my mind how what we're putting on the field as an officiating product in the SEC is tolerated right now, but it is. So I'm just going to let it be. But I will say this. As good a night as this was for Tennessee, they got the win, 45-42. I told you over the last month, a lot of people in Knoxville had this game circled. That's the one. Well, now you look at the box score. And remember when they played Ole Miss, they came out on the wrong side, and I said compounding matters is they were on the field for over 90 plays defensively. And that caught up to them the next week against Alabama. Well, Tennessee plays Kentucky, and then they got Georgia. This time, Tennessee's coming off a win, and they're playing Georgia this week. Line on that thing's about 21. Georgia by 21. Georgia minus 21. Here is potentially a big problem. Yesterday, this box score makes no sense. I mean, this thing's crazy. Tennessee ran 47 plays. They scored 45. They ran 47 plays. That's pretty good points per play average if you want to save yourself the math out there. Why don't you take a guess at how many plays Kentucky ran in this loss? You think 79? No. 89? No. How about 99 total plays Kentucky ran yesterday. I think they ran it 50 times and threw it 49 times. And so you got the win. What kind of price will your defensive roster pay when they play the University of Georgia, most physical team in this conference, this coming week, in the second half particularly? Some other very oddball facets to this box score. 461 to 612, Tennessee got outgained. And the time of possession, shout out to our buddy Parker, Stats of War, 14 minutes to 46 minutes? Yeah, exactly. That's a big gap. It didn't end up mattering, but that's a big gap. So Tennessee wins. Congratulations to the Vols. 21-point dogs. By far the most potent passing attack that Georgia will have faced all year. And a lot of people are excited to watch that, myself included. What about Cincinnati? I would say outside of the Bama-LSU game, more people wanted to talk to me about this game than any other game that happened yesterday, the Florida game notwithstanding. Cincy 28, Tulsa 20. This is the high wire effect on full display. The high wire effect, to be clear, is once you get deeper and deeper into the season, the high wire just goes up a story, up a story, up a story. See, you start the year, and you know you can't be affording to lose a whole lot, but you're like 10 feet off the ground. And so if you fall, oh, it hurts. It hurts. You may even break a finger or two, but you can fall 10 feet. You can't fall 10 stories. And now the problem with teams that haven't been there before, this late in the year, is they're trying to walk the high wire, but instead of 10 feet above the street, they're 10 stories above the street. And you fall at 10 stories, you don't have a broken pinky. You are street pizza. You're done. And Cincinnati is finding out, just like some other teams have before them, what it's like to walk that high wire this late in the year at this kind of altitude. Cincinnati's a better team than Tulsa. They're probably more than 8 points better than Tulsa. They won by 8 yesterday. Now here's what's happening. The camps have already formed on the Cincinnati front. You either think, based on principle alone of them being undefeated, they belong in the top 4, or you believe that there's more to it than just how many games have you won, because we have to have a more nuanced, properly contextualized conversation about strength of schedule. And if you are in that camp, you had your opinion of Cincinnati probably lessened again yesterday. I think they're right where they should be, and I wouldn't really change anything about them after yesterday. But, man, the similarities between the way they had to win and the way Bama had to win, pretty striking. Cincinnati had to make a defensive stand of their own, a couple of them actually, in the last portion of this game. They lost Jerome Ford, ironically a former Alabama running back. Cincinnati lost Jerome Ford in the second quarter, and so that really put a damper on their ability to run the ball. Bama lost a center yesterday and couldn't run the ball worth anything. So there's a lot of Cincy-Bama comparison to be had yesterday. Tulsa held the ball all game. I don't know what the time of possession there was, one of my most favorite stats in the world. But look, they ran the ball for 300 on Cincinnati. I mean, so there are holes. No one ever painted this as a perfect team. Credit to them for the win. If you've spoken about them in the proper context, you can leave it at that. If you've tried to manufacture top 3, top 4 material out of this team, then you've got a lot of explaining to do that you shouldn't have to do. Because Cincinnati's not one of the 3 or 4 best teams in America, but they're also not outside the top 10. There is a very, very comfortable tier between that 6 to 10 range where they should be, and teams in that range can win 28-20 against Tulsa and be told, oh, you should have done better, but good for you, move on. That's where we have Cincinnati. Therefore, I'm not going to criticize them a whole lot. Credit them for winning. They did what a team in that range could be expected to do in one of their poorer efforts, and that's what Cincinnati did. Michigan State falls yesterday 40-29 to Purdue. I got a padlock stat for you. You tell me this Friday, I'm telling you, boiler up. Aiden O'Connell, most of you don't know who that is. That is the Purdue quarterback. How about 40 of 54, 536 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. As we said earlier in the show, and we've said it before, the back end of Michigan State's defense, that is the clear vulnerability spot. Probably for them as a team, Purdue and Jeff Brom knew it. Purdue and Jeff Brom attacked it. They'll look to do the same thing against Ohio State this week. But I thought our buddies over at College Football Nerds asked a really interesting question about Purdue earlier today. If I can actually pause long enough to pull their account up, I will read it to you verbatim. But I want you to think about this while I kill time and pull it up. Here it is, actually. I don't have to kill any more time. So I want you to listen to this closely and understand what they're saying through me. how much of our view of Purdue football is skewed by the fact that we don't realize they played 2 Power 5 out-of-conference games, while some played none. If you swap the Notre Dame game with just a bad G5 team, Purdue would be 7-2, and among those 7 wins, they would have 2 wins over top 5 teams. Iowa, obviously, and then yesterday against Michigan State. So what they're telling you, and this is dead on the money, it is a classic you aren't what your record says you are deal. What they're saying is Purdue chose to challenge themselves in out-of-conference play. Those of you out there who believe you just are what your record says you are, what you're telling me is you're saying if Purdue, they'd be the same team. If Purdue were to remove Notre Dame from the schedule and put roast beef Tech on there, win the game, you know, a win's a win, win the game, well, they'd be sitting there as a 7-2 team. Same team you're seeing now, because of a lighter schedule, would be better in the win-loss column. Where would we have them? And the answer is you'd have them right in the thick of your top 10 rankings, top 12 rankings, and they'd have 2 of the best wins in the country, and they'd be the same exact team is the point. Just like if Cincinnati had played Arkansas' schedule this year, they'd in all likelihood have multiple losses as the same exact team, and you wouldn't have them anywhere sniffing the top 10. You are not what your record says you are exclusively in this sport, and a win is not exclusively a win, nor is a loss exclusively a loss. Those are 2 of the big lies in college football. I'll probably do a segment Tuesday night about the big lies. We had a 3rd big lie that I had to out today, and I put it out earlier today. And the 3rd big lie was going undefeated is the hardest thing to do in this sport. No, friends, going undefeated in college football is not the hardest thing to do. I would suggest to you it's a whole lot harder to go 10-2 against Arkansas' schedule than it would be to go 12-0 against Cincinnati's schedule. Going undefeated is great. I'm not telling you it's easy. Understand what I said and I didn't say. I didn't say it's easy to go undefeated. I said it's not the hardest thing in the sport to do. If you do it against the schedule that we're talking about there versus the schedule we're talking about over here, 2 different things. So I'll talk about that more Tuesday night. Hey, what about North Carolina? Wake puts up a double nickel, and it's not enough. North Carolina beats them 58-55. I was relieved this happened, not because I was rooting against Wake Forest. I'm indifferent on Wake Forest. What I'm glad of now is we get to speak about Wake in the proper context. Because the way we should have been talking about Wake the whole time is it's a great story. Dave Clawson's doing great things there. This is a phenomenal story in the world of college football this year, and they're a very, very scrappy team. That's the way we should have been talking about Wake. They're no different a team today than they were going into yesterday. But they were artificially inflated by some simply because there was a goose egg in the loss column. It goes right back to the little diatribe I just had about a minute and a half ago. Well, now they've got a loss on their resume. So I don't have to listen to people give me hypotheticals about what an undefeated Wake would be. Now we can talk about them in the proper context and we can credit them. Because I've been wanting to credit Wake, but I can't do it when the standard out there was already overinflating them. Well, now people won't have them overinflated anymore. Now, even though they lost yesterday, it's going to sound weird, credit Wake Forest. You guys are having a great season. It's very, very nice to see. Happy for you guys. Go win the rest of your games. Also, the last thing I wanted to point out is Georgia wood chippered Missouri, as they tend to do every week, 43-6. Now, that's not what stood out yesterday. Georgia beats pretty much everyone they play along those lines, scoreboard-wise. But Stetson Bennett, it is his show. JT Daniels came in yesterday, and you could actually hear the hinges rust and creak. You haven't seen him in so long. And he did some good things, he did some bad things, but it became obvious. I mean, obviously that's what they've seen in practice, and that's why they've got Stetson Bennett in this game. I've made my feelings known on how they could maximize their potential. I'm not going to go down that road tonight, but I did think it was noteworthy that Georgia did not exactly pound the rock for like 8 yards per carry yesterday, and so for the first time in a while, whether through necessity or choice, Todd Monken and the offensive staff asked Stetson Bennett to do more yesterday at quarterback than they probably ever have. And he, with some exception, maybe some underthrows he didn't have to pay the ultimate price for, he didn't play bad at all. And I think there are camps that have already formed on Stetson Bennett, and you have got your opinion of him. If you think he's the guy who can take Georgia to the national championship, then obviously that's not going to change based on yesterday. And if you think that he can get fat on inferior competition, but when the pressure ramps up and you're playing more high-level teams and you have to score out of necessity instead of choosing to be able to work on things that he won't be able to answer the bell, yesterday didn't change your opinion. So having said that, it's always been a hard spot for us because Stetson Bennett is like a model citizen, and you love the tenacity, you love the competitive spirit he has, and yet you make an observation and you want to be true to your observation. So I've kind of walked the fence on this and saying, yeah, I'll have to see them. Let me put it that way. I'd have to see them win a championship with Bennett at quarterback to believe they're capable of it, but I'll pull for him. So I guess in a way, am I pulling for myself to be wrong? I don't know. But yeah, so I'm very torn on the whole Stetson Bennett thing. That is a lot of what we saw yesterday.